Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Come on in, everyone. Come on in. We have quite a few that are watching live stream and then more that are arriving. So we're just going to go ahead and get started because we don't want to keep our live streaming people just staring at their poor little computer screens. But thank you so much for being here. I'm Jody Waterhouse, and I'm Director of Industry and Community Engagement for the Shiley Marcos School of Engineering, which happens to house the Center for Cybersecurity. So I do a lot of work around our cyber outreach program. So within the Center for Cybersecurity, we have degrees of which you're all associated with, whether it's our Master's in Engineering and Technology in Cyber and or our Cyber Ops and Leadership online program. We also do research in the area that's headed up by Dr. Gordon Romney, and unfortunately he couldn't be with us tonight because he's out of town. His wife has been ill, so they're tending to some doctor's appointments. And then Mark Castellano, who's my colleague in the outreach and engagement area, really then kind of oversee everything else. So all of our outreach to industry, to community groups, that includes our high school program. So we do a lot of work around our K through 12 education outreach, where we're hosting high school camps, cyber camps, actually on campus, all the way up to seasoned cyber professionals. Actually, the week before Thanksgiving break, we hosted here over 100 cyber professionals from all over the country who came in to learn with us for a day and a half about cyber law, risk, and policy. You all should have received an email about that. As a student, quite often, if we have the room, we want you to participate in that complimentary. So make sure that you keep an eye out. If you're not getting emails from me, then we definitely need to talk at the cocktail reception because you need to know about these educational opportunities that are happening. We have actually organized 8 major programs since the last week of September. So we're busy, and there's a lot going on, and we want you all to take advantage of it in addition to your program, your degree program. The other reason to keep in touch with us is that we're also talking to industry, and they all want to hire you. So it's important that we know you and that we can link up with industry so we can introduce our students. And then we can also do events like this, which is our fall cyber mixer, where we bring industry in to have a dialogue and one-on-one interaction with you. So we'll tend to pick a specific cyber topic for the actual presentation part, but the real rich dialogue happens at the cocktail reception after, and that's where you get to interact and network with industry professionals, and many of our students have actually landed either internships and/or jobs as a result of that. So I do encourage you not to be a wallflower during the networking session, because it's super important that you meet all of these wonderful people that are here with us. So thank you again for being here. It's not easy to be here on the Monday after a holiday. We realize that, and that's probably why we're missing some students today, but that was the only day this building was available, and we love this room. So thank you for being here with us. We really do appreciate it. So tonight's format is going to be that we're going to hear from our keynote presenter for about 20 minutes, and then we'll invite our panelists up to the stage, and we'll do a panel discussion for about an hour. And that really is that interactive dialogue with the audience and the panelists. They're going to share some of their expertise, certainly their background, and talk and take a deeper dive into tonight's topic, which is emerging technologies. But this is really your chance to ask them questions. And if you're a little shy about that, then that's what the reception also is after. So we will probably end between about 6:30, 6:40, and then we'll head out to the reception, which ends at 7:30. So that'll give you a good 45 minutes or so to interact with all of our industry professionals. So sound good? All right. So with that, I would like to introduce our keynote presenter, who is a dear, dear friend to the university. He is an alum as well, which we're very proud of. He's on our Cyber Center advisory board. He has taught for us in the executive program, so we're just thrilled to have him here tonight sharing some of his expertise with you. So let me just share a little bit of Brad's background. He is the founder of the Defense Security Information Exchange, creating a defense industry government team to share classified and unclassified cyber events that affect global defense companies from state-sponsored cyber espionage. As an executive at General Atomics, he currently leads their corporate venturing efforts, seeking industry-changing innovations, including artificial intelligence and advanced cyber technology. GA has also been a vigorous supporter of cybersecurity. He chairs the USD CSET Advisory Council, as I mentioned, and sits on the board of the ESET Foundation, supporting cybersecurity initiatives in the region, and he writes on the intersection of law and cybersecurity. So as a graduate of our law school and a dear, dear friend to the University of San Diego, please help me welcome Mr. Brad Lunn.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, can you hear this in the back there? All right. Well, first of all, Jody, Mark, thank you for organizing these. You guys are very lucky to have an environment where you have the school organizing these kind of rich events. A lot of programs just don't have that, and to have that be made available to you as a side benefit is really quite an advantage. When Jody asked if I would say a few words at this keynote, I thought, well, what is it that I could possibly say that might be a little bit provocative, might be new, something you haven't heard before, might be useful to you? And so I really thought long and hard about it, and I want to start off with a story that was really quite shaping for me in a couple of ways. Let me give you a little bit of context to this. It was probably the single most important piece of advice that I've ever received from a professor, probably through all of my degrees. So the setting is Harvard. It was an advanced corporate finance program, and the subject was fairly complex. This professor of mine, this was for an honors thesis. An enormous amount of research goes into one of these honors theses. And the professor is an older fellow, very experienced, man of few words, certainly not of a lot of praise. And I come to him with this paper, and back in that day, you had to type it out. Just that alone was a lot of work to get done. He spent the time to go through it meticulously. And when I sat down with him, his feedback was much different than what I had ever expected. And essentially the feedback was, you know, Brad, it seems to me that you have found the people who are at the leading edge of this subject. And amongst all of these leading edge experts, it's clear in my mind that you've linked them properly together and you put them in context, and it seems to me that you have command of this material. Well, I thought, holy moly, jackpot. I just scored on this thing. And then he went on and he said, but I want you to consider that command of complex material may not be enough. You may choose to not be satisfied with that. I didn't know where he was going with that. Well, what are you talking about? How can you have more than command of complex material? And he went on to say, you know, let me give you an example. He said, do doctors in an ER save lives? And I'm still reeling from the fact that I'm kind of getting dressed down by him now after showing command of the material. And he said, well, think about it. He said, he said, doctors have deep command of material, skills, knowledge, ability. So they work on someone if they didn't get worked on, a patient didn't get worked on, that patient certainly would have perished. Did that doctor save a life? Well, I don't know, it's a trick story, no. He said, think about it. If that doctor wasn't there, another doctor would have been. If that doctor wasn't there, another doctor would have been. So if that first doctor never was born, would that patient still be alive? Yes. Okay, so what did they do that's different? And then he went on with that story, and I'm still reeling from this 20-year-old kid. And he said, try and step out. Try and step out and have your own voice. I don't want to just know that you have command of material. I want to hear your voice on these subjects. I want to hear what you have to add that is going to be different if you weren't here. Going back to the doctor example that he gave me. What if you were not there? What would be different? I want to see your fingerprint on this thing. And my first reaction was, well, who am I? The people I'm referencing in these documents are discussed as Nobel possible people, experts. How do I possibly have anything to say that they haven't thought of? But that's exactly what he was demanding. And so really the upshot of that is that he wanted to have you make a mark, me make a mark in that. And so just how does that example kind of relate? And I have to, when I look back on it, I think, I hated that advice, and I hated that dressing down. But he was absolutely right. And if it wasn't for that, if you will, sanctioning that it's okay to try and step out and push the edge of the envelope, I probably wouldn't have been doing it. So relating that back to cyber, just how does that relate? It relates absolutely one-to-one. And first of all, I applaud you for applying yourselves in this program. It's hard to get yourselves back into school and to be studying more and more and trying to get command of material, and make no bones about it. Cyber is warfare at the personal level, at the company level, and at the national, international, sovereign level. It is absolute full contact warfare. And so it's really even more difficult when you look at it in terms of being more than just a technical dimension, but being more of a people dimension. People are at the center of cyber issues and cyber challenges. We advance our state of the art, the enemies advance their state of the art, they have resources, we have resources, it's this ongoing fight. So using the analogy of a fight, let me remind you that scholars and students of military history continuously warn us of the risks of fighting the last war. How many of you have heard that phrase, we live to fight the last war, right? That is something that is rooted. Why does that happen? Why do we not learn from history? Do we do it today? We still do it today. When you look at how the U.S. budgets for its military, we still in large part are fighting World War II and Vietnam. And so we tend to be slow in coming around to new things, new technologies, new rules, new ways of engagement. And so why? Ultimately, it's about people. It's about people and culture. We tend to be slow to change. Our species doesn't like change. We do all kinds of things to resist it, sometimes overtly, sometimes subtly, but we resist change. And the truth is, we get comfortable. We all get comfortable. And with cyber, there's really no reason to think that we are immune to that problem of fighting the last war. How do we get comfortable? We get comfortable with our frameworks. We get comfortable with our security policies, that if we were to just do these, that it will be enough, it'll be necessary, but it's not sufficient to fight a war. It's not sufficient to just be comfortable. And so, think about when you go into the popular press and you read articles from an expert on cyber, how many times do you read something and say, my God, that is new? That's an interesting thought. Commonly not. Commonly, it's something that could have easily been said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If I read another story about how people need to keep their systems patched, I think I'm going to scream, right? And so go to a conference. You'll hear people talk about what's new in cyber, and what do they talk about? They'll talk about what's old in cyber. You go to a conference even on legal issues of cyber. A lot of the legal issues are issues that really haven't changed much from many, many years ago. And so we still are not adapting to things that are changing right in front of us. So what are my thoughts on how to do that? Does that mean frameworks and checklists and policies are a bad thing? No, not at all. They're a great thing. They're necessary. They're just not sufficient. My challenge to you guys is to not be satisfied with recycling old knowledge alone. Don't be satisfied with old rules, old frameworks, old curriculum, old presentations. Make your mark on these elements. And it doesn't matter. I hear from people at all levels of a company and all levels of government, and I'll hear excuses, well, I'm just at this level. I can't make a difference. Well, are you kidding? You can make a difference at every level. It doesn't matter if you're entry level, it doesn't matter if you're mid-career, it doesn't matter if you're an executive. I've had a vice president complain to me that his organization has a management problem. Seriously. And so we all have labels that we might apply to things, but in the end, it's a cop-out of trying to really grapple with these things and really care. Looking for subtle assumptions that are no longer really valid, extremely powerful. How are you working on becoming a better observer of things that are right in front of you that maybe you see, maybe you don't? Or maybe you see it, but you're not connecting some other things that have also changed along with it. Try and become good with that. Try and look for those gaps. Let me tell you about one cyber gap just like that I saw. A company, an unnamed company, was implementing a very good framework. It was a NIST framework, it's excellent. And going to put in timeouts for passwords. Great. Please explain to me why you're going to put in this password, why you're getting so much pushback. Oh, it's set for 5 minutes. Why are you putting it in place? Oh, we want to break the session. We want to have a break of the session so that we don't have an open network session. Okay. And when the password times out and you just get a blank screen, what happens? The music in the background is still streaming. What do you think is happening? The network session hasn't been broken. There's still a very hot live network session behind, but you get this facade of security by having to put in another password. Session is still live and hot. Did the guy who's explaining why they're doing this observe that? Didn't occur to him. He was going to get in the checklist. It's not saying the checklist is bad, but he didn't have a full understanding of why, and then didn't become a good observer of what that really meant in his environment. So in any case, I will leave you with that note. Trust yourself to step out. Trust yourself to push the edge. When you push the edge, you may get some pushback. That's part of the price of advancement. Don't be worried about having people say, oh, I haven't heard about that yet. I haven't heard about that yet. Don't worry about it. Continue to press. If not you, who? Anyway, that has exhausted the sum total of all my knowledge. The keynote, I wanted to keep it short to give time for some dialogue. And the questions can be on anything. You don't need to be shy. The questions can be on anything that I brought up, can be on anything that I didn't bring up. And if you want to push back on anything that I had to say, I won't wilt, I promise. All right? Can't believe it. All of you are quiet. And in the back, Peter. Yeah, good question. Let's see. So I would say that there is And depending on the groups you're talking to, so the question, let me repeat the question. So what are the main challenges that I see across the org, from a board level to executive level, non-technical groups in improving cyber? Is that essentially it? And so I would say it depends on a couple of things. One, I would say one trend that I've seen is that there is not an understanding of what cyber security really means. A lot of times people will say that cyber equals a computer thing, our IT team will take care of it, okay? Within IT, you'll have people that will say, oh, cybersecurity, that's not my job, that's the cybersecurity people. I'm just a system administrator. I don't have responsibility. I just design the networks. I don't have responsibility for cyber. That's Sally over here. She's responsible for it. I see a lot of that. Within the technical orgs, so engineering, program management, people who have responsibility for delivering a product, schools still graduate people that don't know how to spell cyber. And so you'll have people at the helm who are driving a program and driving a product, and is cybersecurity a part of that product development? Oh no, I can almost guarantee that it is an afterthought. I can almost guarantee that it's an afterthought. And you'll have people who will say, oh, well, we've built it in. If you were really to question them about it, you would find out that it's largely going to be an afterthought. And it's not because there's any malice, it's just because they don't have an appreciation that if you really want cyber to be done right, it has to be baked in from the beginning and thought about from the inception. It's hard to put a veneer on it. Long answer to a short question. Good question, though. What else? There can't only be one question. Jody, there is only one question. What do you do? Sir? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so the question being to comment on, and the reason I'm repeating it is so the folks can hear on the streaming, is that make comments on whether to go towards a company that has a cyber department or is highly cyber oriented, or maybe do something else. So let me give you a couple of thoughts. First of all, when you are deciding how you're going to apply the next part of your life, my very strong recommendation is that you make sure that you yourself know what your real passion is. That you make sure that whatever it is you do to invest the next X number of years doing something is one, that you really like it. Why? It's how you're going to spend your life. You're going to spend more time doing that than you're going to spend at home, right? So it's got to be aligned with who you are. And the other thing is, from a practical standpoint, is we tend to be really good at things we like. Things we are really passionate about are the things that we really make progress on. Those things that we don't do so well. Cyber is a big label, right? It means 50 different things to 50 different people or companies. And so I would make sure that you know yourself and then go after those opportunities that are really aligned, irrespective of what the label is on the title. That role is really aligned with who you are, so that you can do the most good, you can have them apply the most passion to it. Maybe buttoning up wireless things is what you want to do. Maybe it's not. Maybe designing the next piece of AI to be doing offensive cyber. is what you want to be doing. Maybe not. I would find what that is. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, ask the question. I didn't ask the question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so my personal view is that cyber is so important to the ongoing existence of a firm that you should bring it in. And if you need external resources to do that, to maybe partner with that internal team that you're going to stand up, that you do that, you partner with specialized resources. But that for most firms, it's going to be so crucial that it's almost negligent to say it doesn't really matter, we'll farm it out to someone else. No one will care more about your business than you. And if you're fortunate enough to come into a firm that is building one of these practices, ultimately they are trusting you to keep them safe because they don't understand largely what it is that they're dealing with. All they know is that they're bad things and it's labeled cyber. And so my personal opinion is if you had a choice of going to a place that was running like a Swiss watch, I don't know where that is, I've never seen it yet, but I've heard they exist somewhere. Yeah, something. And so, or a place that has a lot of warts, I would go to the place with warts. I would go to a place like that because you can make a difference. In the course of 2 months or 3 months, you might be able to make a change where you step away and say, we started here, we ended here on my watch. And that is a hoot to be able to make a mark. Again, it's making a mark. And give yourselves permission to make that mark. Why not you? Right? Who else? What else? Professor Heckman, anything else? What did I forget?
Can I comment on the answers you've given so far?
Okay.
Okay. So the first one was Aaron's question was whether you recommended working for a place where security is the focus or working in some place where security is just a supporting function. I would say that your income will be much higher if you work for a place where you're doing the main thing the company does than it will be if you're working in a supporting function that's not directly related to the business of the company. And even though cyber is really directly related, just about everything every business does now, most businesses don't know that yet.
That's right.
So I would definitely recommend working for a cyber-focused company. And don't be afraid to jump every 2 or 3 years to get a wide variety of experience.
You can have 2 people, so tagging on to this comment, which I agree with, tagging on to that, you can have someone with a largely similar skill set go to one place that is where they know that cyber really matters, and you're going to be talking about a $500,000 or more compensation package, where you go to a place that doesn't understand it, they may look at you as a cost center. So 100% right on that. And there was a question over here too. Sir. Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yep. China. Yeah, so a lot of questions there. Let me make one general. Could everyone hear that, kind of the question, the nature of that question? Offensive versus defensive, cyber? Okay, so how many people here, since when they were a little kid at least, or any time in your life, study any martial art? Anyone? Martial arts? What martial art? Okay. What other martial arts people study? Okay. In your training, did your master ever distinguish this technique is only offensive, but this technique is only defensive? Probably not. When people learn martial arts, they learn a lot of different techniques, and they can be offensive or defensive depending on how they're applied. And so how to build some of the offensive elements, when you look at who is really good with offensive cyber, do they all have credentials? Did they all go to MIT? No. They don't need credentials. They grew up doing it from the time they were young. They were the ones who were hacking their mom's microwave, trying to see what would happen. They were, when I was a kid, people would try and see how they could break into the phone system and make free phone calls and all. And so those were the skill sets that people were doing then. And I think the most important thing that makes people particularly good at that is curiosity in trying things over and over and over again. I suspect if they haven't started to really learn that, you might be able to make that person, using the martial arts analogy, you might be able to get them to be a yellow belt. They will never become a black belt if they are not curious about that kind of side of it. So, how to develop that skill? I would recommend either a program, or I would recommend giving them a challenge of how to break something, preferably in a very closed environment, but how they would break it. Or maybe you could show them show them a hijack exploit. Demonstrate a man in the middle, right? What else? Now I've probably gone over, right? And now I'm going to be in trouble. Sir, oh yeah, sir. Okay, so let me cleave this into two sides. Let me say that with a company like ours where we build unmanned aircraft, there's the corporate wall itself. So our main information systems, SAP, Exchange, all the databases, etc. We get probably about 250,000 attacks a day against our systems, about 250,000, sometimes more, sometimes less, but 250,000 a day. We've had exploits with classified bugs being injected into our systems, and then all the typical things that every other company has. People falling prey to phishing, system administrators falling prey to phishing to an enormous extent. It's amazing what people will do if they think there's a free iPod involved. It's amazing. It's like having a conference and having free food. You can sell anything out if you offer a burrito. To people who are making six figures, they'll still come for the free burrito. And so, we really see everything that you've heard. But phishing is a biggie. Phishing tends to still be pretty successful. On the non-enterprise side, against our products, I wouldn't be able to really comment about it. But you know, when you build a product that is highly network enabled, imagine the kind of things that might happen to a system. I was at a little company called Boeing, and they have a product you may have heard of called the 757. Has anyone ever heard of that? You know, and so are you guys familiar with a hack? The hacks that have been kind of evolving around them. These things, it was a hack of the entertainment system, and the part that was a little bit chilling was the hackers were able to get to what? Engine controls, something called the FADEC. The FADEC is this boring little system that no one's ever heard of. For full authority digital engine control. Yeah, you can access it through the entertainment system. Kind of like Jeep with their Jeep system. They were told that they were vulnerable, didn't believe it. They were told by DHS that they were vulnerable. It took a journalist with a laptop driving with the Jeep development team, taking over the system again. How? Through the entertainment system to get to engine control, braking control, transmission. The first clue was the windshield wipers. You know when the guy is turning on your windshield wipers from his laptop that you're going to be in for trouble. Not ours. Not ours. I can tell you that. So on that. Okay. All right. And I'll be around if you have any questions. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Brad. And Brad's going to join the panel so we can have further discussion with him. But at this time, I'd like to invite our panelists up to the stage. And while they're getting situated, just a couple dates to keep in mind that will finish us out for 2018, which is hard to believe that we're in almost the last month. We finish our Cyber Saturdays at USD, which is for our high school students. So if any of you have a high school student or know of one that's interested, this Saturday from 9 to 3 is our cryptography workshop. So let us know and we can send you information on that. And then on December 6th, the CyberSecurity Student Association, which if you're not aware of, is the new group that's been formed this fall. Their last program for the year is on December 6th. So watch for your email for more information about that. If you aren't getting any of these emails, you definitely need to come see me during the reception, and let's make sure that we've got your right email. All right? So wanted to make sure I just plant those as we finish out 2018 together, and then we'll have a whole nother calendar of programs and events coming for 2019. So thank you very much again to all of our panelists for being here. You think Brad is good? He is in great company with more cyber professionals and experts that we've invited here to talk about emerging technologies. So I'm going to introduce our moderator, and then Peter will take over and introduce the rest of our panelists, and they'll give you a little bit of background information so that you know who's joining us. But Peter, to my right here, Peter Stockberger is the Senior Managing Associate and member of the firm's Global Employment, Labor, and Cybersecurity Group at Denton's Law Firm, and another proud alum of USD, which this really wasn't on purpose, but I got a plug when we've got a Toreros in the house. So I'm also a graduate of our USD School of Law. So, and you got a plug from the dean at our cyber law symposium a couple weeks ago. So good job, you and Brad. I like you're showing us off well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter, and then Peter, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Jody, and thank you all for staying with us through Brad's excellent keynote speech. I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the excellent professionals here on the panel, their titles, where they're from, and then I'm going to allow them to tell you about a little bit what they do in the cybersecurity field. Brad needs no introduction, as he just discussed. Mark Heckman, professor of practice here at the USD School in the cybersecurity program. Jonathan Driscoll, to his left, is a PhD and the lead scientist at Analytics Ventures. To his immediate left is Mike, I'm going to butcher this again, Jeske.
Good job.
Good job, all right. Mike is the CEO and co-founder of MedCrypt, which is a technology startup focused on medical device cybersecurity. And to his left is Jordan Gachi, special agent with the FBI. Mark, if we could maybe start with you at the far end, since Brad has already introduced himself, and we can just sort of go down the line. If you guys could introduce yourselves and discuss what you do in the field of cybersecurity.
Well, some of you I know have been in my classes, so you know that I teach here in both the CSOL and the cyber engineering programs. I'm also developing undergraduate cyber courses as well now. In the past, before I came here about 4 years ago, I worked for 30 years in the field. Initially got my start working on high assurance operating systems under the old Orange Book, trusted security standards, and worked on a Class A operating system, which was the highest level of security, highest level of evaluation that a system could possibly have. And then over the years, I've worked on intrusion detection systems, and I've also worked in the IT field and in both the financial and health industries, helping to secure IT systems. So I have quite a wide range, quite a wide background in the security field. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Sure, my name is Jonathan Driscoll. I work with a company, Analytic Ventures. It's a venture capital fund in San Diego. We specialize in investing in artificial intelligence companies and doing consulting with people who want AI. So I've got a fair amount of industry experience, especially around San Diego, and sort of seeing what companies are formed, why they're formed, what they're missing, helping them out. My background is, physics is the background, but a lot of software, so large-scale simulation systems, and then hardware, so electronics. And of course, once you put software and hardware together with networks, you're kind of in the middle of a lot of technologies. So my specialty for tonight, I guess, is the AI aspect of the emerging technologies, but also sort of a question about how companies form and the things they look at and the things that they miss. But hopefully I can maybe add some interjections on.
Great. Hey, my name is Micah Jeske. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called MedCrypt. My background is in medical physics, which is the underlying technology of radiation oncology and diagnostic imaging. In 2014, I was a product manager at a big medical device company. This medical device produces a whole lot of radiation when you turn it on. Ideally, it treats cancer. If patient's not in the right position, it can do very bad things. I was in a meeting with some hospital executives, a 4-hour executive meeting, where in the last 5 minutes they said, hey, by the way, we're treating the Dalai Lama for prostate cancer, and we're concerned that the Chinese government might attempt to assassinate him by hacking your medical device. So we pen tested it. Here are 15 vulnerabilities, go fix them. And there was audible laughter from the executives at the device firm, like, you can't do that. There's no way you could do it. The hospital network's secure. That's not our problem. So I started researching the field and found that most medical devices have 0 cybersecurity features in them at all. So I started this company, MedCrypt, to make it easy for medical device vendors to build cybersecurity features directly into their devices. And we're based in Solana Beach.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordan Gachi, and I work at the FBI here in San Diego. I'm on a criminal cyber squad here. I've been working with the FBI for about 3.5 years now. Prior to that, I was a software engineer, project manager at a small firm in the Midwest for about 5.5 years. And prior to that, I got my master's in computer science from the University of Iowa. Here at the FBI, I primarily focus on the criminal side versus the national security side of cybersecurity. So we investigate everything from your phishing attacks, your cyber-enabled fraud through email attacks, computer intrusions, and primarily my focus now is on Internet of Things enabled botnets. So that's kind of the emerging technology that I'm focused in currently.
Great. So the topic for this panel is emerging technologies, focusing on AI, Internet of Things, other emerging technologies in the field. So I'd be interested to start off the discussion with some of your practical experiences. And Mike, you just sort of touched on a few in the medical device field, which I agree with your opinion. Most medical devices don't have great cybersecurity. I think that was a Homeland episode where the pacemaker gets hacked.
So actually, yes.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So there's this episode of Homeland where the main character who's a terrorist is he's a good guy too, kind of like Darth Vader. But so he's going to hack the vice president's pacemaker to kill the guy. And while this is happening, I'm screaming at my wife, there's no way this is possible. This is ridiculous. This is a ludicrous premise. You couldn't possibly do that. Only to find out that about 5 years before that episode aired, a very big medical device company got in a lot of trouble when a cybersecurity researcher proved that that exact attack vector was plausible. So watching that episode sort of introduced me to this concept. And there's an interesting story afterward where 10 years after the first company that got in trouble for that, a security research firm found another pacemaker that had a very similar vulnerability. And rather than reporting it to the FDA, they partnered with a hedge fund and they shorted the stock. And they went on CNBC and talked about how this company was going to go to zero because of this vulnerability. And that all of this was happening while we were looking at the opportunity to start this company. And we realized that, man, this is coming up enough that there's got to be something here.
So in that space, in the IoT space, AI space, and maybe Brad, turning to you at General Atomics, what I think we discussed before the panel, when you think of AI and IoT, people are thinking of household devices, they're thinking of Alexa. I'm talking general public, maybe not this audience. What are some of the unusual uses of AI or IoT, perhaps, that you're seeing in your space that are emerging in the field?
Well, let's see. So a couple of comments about AI generally. AI seems to have struck a chord with people that like to liken AI with the Terminator, and that AI is way further advanced than what it is. I think there's a lot more vaporware out there than there is solid technology. There are some applications that are quite impressive that I've seen around some games. I've seen some impressive technology in the application of AI with dealing with voice control of machines. And so when you think of how Alexa works, it has to take sound, what we know is, say, words. It has to convert these sound waves into words, and then those words into intent. And that is actually very difficult. The way we speak, we have a lot of other knowledge about communication. And so think of the most basic question like, Alexa, what's the weather? Well, are you asking the definition of the weather? No. What you really mean is, what is the temperature and rain forecast for where I am right now? That's what you meant to say. But what you said is, what's the weather? Well, dealing with those kind of things, it's getting much, much better. I've seen some demonstrations of being able to listen to aircraft flight control in being able to interpret to a amazing degree of certainty what the intent was of the communication between controllers and pilots. And so I'm seeing some elements of progress, but still I'm also seeing enormous gaps where you wouldn't want certainly safety of life yet on those kind of things. So really there's quite a ways to go.
So John, you also work in the AI space. What are some of the emerging trends that you're seeing?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree about it's a hot field, and as fields become hot, they get very overblown, right? So AI is now going to either take over the world, take over all your jobs, these sort of catastrophic things. It is something that's happening right now. So voice recognition, obviously, self-driving cars. There's a number of fields. So I would give an example and say the medical field. You don't want to turn everything over to the AI, and they're not going to, and that's not what's happening. What's happening now is these systems, say a system that does X-ray. So one of our portfolio companies, you can get a mammogram, right? So you want to find the cancer, breast cancer, in the mammogram. And the AI for that works incredibly well. It actually works better than doctors. But the best thing is the AI with the doctors. And sort of extend out to things to think about when people say, AI is just going to do this and it's going to make all these decisions for us. Not really. We're going to make decisions about what we want the AI to do, and it will do that. So people say, is it evil? Is it good? Well, I don't know. Are people evil? Are people good? What do you want to do with it? And I think, as the humans, as the people who are kind of the creativity and really the intelligence comes from you, deciding what you want to do with it. And it's definitely not going to get rid of doctors. It's not going to get rid of jobs, and it's certainly not going to get rid of kind of humanity. I would say it works the other way around. It actually allows us to figure out what we want to do when technology is no longer in the way.
Mark, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to just bring the discussion of AI here back specifically to cybersecurity. The number one way that artificial intelligence techniques, really machine learning techniques, which is not the same thing, is being used in the cybersecurity field right now as an intrusion detection, is detecting intrusions into systems. And there's a company called Cylance, which was just bought out by somebody else, I can't remember who.
BlackBerry.
By BlackBerry. And Cylance has an intrusion detection system, really like an antivirus system, which is AI-based. And so, and in the last year or two, their results have been as good or better than the traditional signature-based antivirus programs. So that's where AI has its most significant application right now. I'd say the promise has been maybe oversold. There's only so it can't do any better than the data that we have. And so, you know, don't be blinded by the fact that, oh my God, it's machine learning, it's artificial intelligence. This is going to totally be better than anything else. It's another technique. It's one more tool in your Swiss Army knife that you, as professionals, will use. You don't allow it to make the decisions for you, but you use it to help understand the data that you're seeing. And so when it comes to AI right now and cybersecurity, that's what we're talking about, intrusion detection. Not to say there won't be other applications later, but that's where the action is right now.
So I was at a conference in DC that was hosted by the US Cyber Institute, and the winner of the DARPA Challenge from the Carnegie Mellon Institute, they developed basically a self-learning IT system, a server, that fought against the other universities in the competition and beat out everybody without any human intervention. It was a self-learning, self-healing system. And his keynote address was, the future of companies is there will be no IT department. It will be a self-learning server, it will be a self-learning system. And I hear you guys say, AI is not going to take over the world, it's not going to change the systems, but is that the reality, or is that more sort of government side level of infrastructure versus what we're seeing right now on the private side?
What's your time frame? 5 years, 10 years? No. 50 years? Maybe. I have no idea where the technology is going to go in that time. But 5 or 10 years, not a chance. We don't know what we're trying to get it to do to be able to build it yet.
So just on a comment for an entire IT department, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I think that is not likely. But back on my earlier theme of be a good observer, I would, what you were saying, I just jogged my thinking on a application I've seen that really merged two technologies in offensive cyber. It was marrying some of the voice recognition with the ability to do essentially machine learning driven writing. So my son is a collegiate ball player, and a number of years ago, high school teams were using a tool called Game Changer. And Game Changer is basically a scoring tool. But the thing that's interesting about Game Changer is that when a game is done, a baseball game is done, it will write a write-up of that game, of what was it about. And it is astounding how good it is. It's stunningly good. And it is, and it uses all kinds of idioms that are only baseball type of idioms. So-and-so tossed a gem. So that technology has been around for a while, and it's just gotten better. So pairing that technology, NSA has a tool set that pairs that technology of writing with voice recognition, where a small clip of your voice, if I made a prank phone call to you and got you to stay on the phone for just a very short period of time, I would be able to fool with a machine voice almost everyone other than your parents, probably. And they might recognize it's you, but maybe they think you have a cold or we're in a bad mood or something. And so it's extremely good at spoofing voices, at spoofing interactions. And so what was chilling about this tool set was I asked, well, so this tool, you give it an objective to go out and write basically news about things, fake news, and I asked, well, how many interactions can it do in an hour? Any guesses? 160,000. And the writing quality is exceptional. Exceptional writing quality. So you give it an objective to go and write, it goes out and writes.
So before we move on to the IoT sector, this is my fear as a lawyer. Our profession is going to be destroyed by AI because everyone's fear is that we do research, we look at cases, there's just going to be a robot who can research every single case, produce the perfect brief, and then, so my time is limited, is my point, which I'm fine with. Less lawyers is a better
You've got
thing.
15 months, it's okay.
That's right. So turning from AI to IoT, which Mike and Jordan, I want to get your perspectives because that's sort of your space. And Mike, maybe you can speak in the medical device space from an IoT perspective. What are some of the trends and issues you're seeing?
Yeah, so the healthcare space is in general a laggard in technology. It's usually 10 or 15 years behind other industries, which as an entrepreneur makes it a really interesting space because you can do something that the general internet did 10 years ago and do it in healthcare and you look like a genius. So it's a great industry if you want to look really smart. But one of the areas
that's
that
healthcare for you.
Yes.
It's a little behind.
Well, one of the areas where it is a leader really is in, I guess what you would call the Internet of Things or Internet of Medical things. Things like CT scanners have been networked for a very long time and shared images with one another and shared images with other information systems. So those really look a lot like IoT devices, and they've been around in a networked capacity for at least 20, if not 30 years. But one of the challenges is that companies now say, oh, hey, we've got this thing that's sending data in a local network. We should just connect it to the internet, and then it'll be cloud enabled, and we can charge our customers more money. And they take this device that was not designed to be connected to the internet, and they connect it to the internet, and then they're surprised when researchers find vulnerabilities in these devices. So your question was, what are the trends in healthcare? Right now, we're seeing a lot of healthcare technology companies that spent the last 5 or 10 years connecting their things to the internet, now actually trying to secure those things, which is rather challenging and largely has fallen on the shoulders of hospitals. So if you are a hospital network security expert, your services will be in great demand for a long time to come. However, our approach to the problem is more, we sort of look at what Apple has done with the iPhone, and Apple has spent a lot of money building security into the phone so that they're not relying on Verizon being a security expert, right? The iPhone largely itself is a secure system that can operate securely in a hostile environment, and we see medical devices and in general Internet of Things devices going in that direction. So we want to see CT scanners out there in the world that have cryptography built into them, that can operate on a hospital network, that don't care if there's a firewall or not, communicating with the cloud application securely, and ideally making the lives of those people at the hospital whose job it is to secure the network much easier.
So Jordan, Mike just said that's what he wants to see in the future. You're an FBI agent investigating people in the present. What are you seeing in the terms of the problems in the IoT space from a cybersecurity perspective?
Presently, we're seeing exactly the opposite. We are seeing every one of those devices that was not built to be online. And these devices are being compromised by tons of different groups and essentially commoditized. They're renting access to them on the darknet, and anybody that wants to commit any kind of crime, any kind of fraud, any kind of distributed denial of service attack can just go out there and rent them. They don't have to be the hacker anymore. And so these devices have just, as you mentioned, tons of vulnerabilities. Whether they come with SSH enabled by default or default passwords, people don't look into their device when they get them. They don't know that these technologies are enabled by default, and so we're seeing millions upon millions of these devices. And with the exponential growth of these devices and every manufacturer wanting to be the first to market, not focused on security, like Brad mentioned during his keynote speech, the problem is just getting worse and worse and worse.
One quick thing to add to that, like pretty much every CT scanner, and I'm talking about CT scanners a lot because that's my educational background, pretty much everyone runs Windows. And why you would choose an operating system that has something called the blue screen of death for a medical device is beyond me. Pretty much every CT scanner runs Windows. And there was a study that showed like 30% of clinically active CT scanners had botware on them. And the question is, why would somebody put botware on a CT scanner? And the answer is, and you probably know better than me, the person who wrote the bot doesn't know that it's on a CT scanner, it just knows that it's on a Windows box. So this question of why would somebody hack a medical device or why would somebody hack an IoT device, sometimes it's not a targeted attack, they sort of fall prey to more widespread vulnerabilities that are designed for that particular computing environment.
That's exactly right. And fortunately, a lot of these devices that are compromised, we're not seeing them being the target of the attack. Usually they're not trying to exfiltrate data from those devices, which is great for the companies that are putting a lot of these devices in place, especially in critical infrastructure sectors. They're just reselling access to those devices, but once they do that, who knows what's going on, you know.
So it sounds like a common trend in both AI and IoT, from the IoT device space, security by design at the ground level with the engineers, with the folks who are building it. In the AI space, with the engineers who are building the code, security by design. And maybe, Brad, we can start with you, and I think as you mentioned it in part of your keynote, how important is it, this concept of security by design and this concept of moving cybersecurity away from sort of an afterthought to at the front end of operations, product development, enterprise development?
Well, I think the other panelists essentially have been answering that question along the way. It is crucial, and not having security baked in from the beginning opens up an enormous hole. But when you look at the practicality of companies closing these holes, you don't see folks yet stepping up as you would expect to solve some of these. Now, new companies that are starting up are highly motivated because they are the ones that are they're providing the secret sauce, if you will, that will close these holes. But if there isn't a perceived need, if there aren't people being hit with lawsuits or damages or the like, it doesn't catch people's attention. Let me take you guys back to the hack 2016, 17 kind of time frame, so fairly recently, of Dyn. So Dyn was shut down. Dyn is one of the major infrastructure service providers for the internet. How was it done? By attacking webcams and DVRs, basically default passwords, as you had mentioned, in them, and so they were vulnerable. And so basically a botnet of millions of devices was formed with those critical defects and took out some major infrastructure of the US internet. So, almost turning the tables back on that question, Peter, as a lawyer. So let's say you have a client who builds a device, and it might be something that is somewhat simple or kind of boring. It could be a DVR or a webcam. Is your client aware that there are cybersecurity risks? Yes. Did your client build that device? Yes. How much did they spend on that DVR, on the cybersecurity? A tenth of a cent, maybe? A tenth of a cent? So your client only spent a tenth of a cent and allowed something to happen, a 911 system to go down because of your client's actions. I mean, talk about causality. A direct line from damages to awareness to duty. And you haven't seen these kind of lawsuits happen yet. My prediction is you're going to. And I think as soon as you start seeing companies feeling the bite of security or consumers demanding security, you're not going to see the quick action. For example, how many people would pay a little bit more if the webcam in your house, say, watching your family, watching your baby, watching your wife or your husband in your house, would you pay 10 cents more for that if it was really, really secure? I think you would.
Yeah, would you pay twice as much for it if they told you it was secure? Yeah, and how would you know? Why would you believe them?
Good point. Very good point. But ultimately, if security is valuable, which it is, it has to be sold, but you have to trust that it is, in fact, more secure.
So would you think, is it more effective then to see from a regulatory or legal perspective, legislatures start to mandate security by design?
In the late 60s, early 70s, the U.S. Department of Defense started to worry that they had a problem with cybersecurity. and they commissioned some studies. There's something called the Ware Report. Anyone here heard of the Ware Report? So that was, what, 1970 or something like that? And Willis Ware said, we got a problem here, and the only way to fix it is to build security in from the very beginning, design it in. And here we are, right? It's 38, I'm sorry, it's almost 50 years later. Almost 50 years later, and we're talking about the same problems. Like we haven't learned anything. And the fact is, we know how to build security into systems. There was lots of programs that demonstrated it was possible, but nobody does it because, well, the reason Brad mentioned, they're not responsible. They're not liable. I can build a product and sell it online, and I have a nice click-through disclaimer that says, I don't think it's valuable and secure, and if you use it, you agree. If you click here, and then you've just basically signed away any responsibility that I would have for your security. And that's the way the world works. That's why Windows has been around as long as it has, and still, every month, we got 20 critical updates that have to be done in them, because no one's liable for it. And the government has tried to pass, or nibbled around the edges of trying to pass legislation. They don't have a clue what to put in it. Because if they try to legislate some rule that everybody has to follow, they kill innovation, and you've increased the price of everything so high that the vast majority of these devices we think are great tools, no one will buy them anymore. So it's not an easy problem to solve.
So John and Mike, from a industry perspective, do you think that there's a balance where you would see that you would be benefited by sort of a regulatory change or an increase in laws sort of restricting this space? Or does that, as Mark said, that's either going to quash innovation or you're going to double the price? Where do you guys see it?
Well, I mean, the tech people like to say that the tech moves faster than the laws, right? They come out with technology and the legal system catches up. In this case, yeah, there's a problem. There's a lot of cleanup to do, right? So in the 60s and 70s, they knew about security. And the fact the systems back then, like the Unix mainframes, you had administrators, you had passwords, they were already networked. And I think a lot of what happened actually when the PC came out in the 80s, there was no security. I mean, you turn on the computer, you were in. And it was great. It was meant to be an open system. You could just write software for it. You could write hardware for it. And I remember being a kid with our PC, we never thought this is going to get hacked because it wasn't on the internet. Okay, so everything was stripped down for the price point probably because you could actually afford a computer now, and that was great. And then the internet happened. And so a lot of the bugs in the 90s just directly traceable to Microsoft. And to their credit, towards the end of the 90s, they stopped. I remember there was a hiatus in Microsoft. Bill Gates said, 2-week period, no one write a single line of code until you figure out something about security. But it's been patch after patch after patch after patch since then. And I don't really know what the simple solution was, get a Mac. But I think it really does come down to building it. helps a little bit. Certainly.
Security.
Yeah, but I think something like the iPhone you mentioned, the OS itself was built to be secure and built to be closed, compared to the Android, which is more open. But for all of you graduating into this world, let me put it this way, there's a lot of cleanup to do. I think we kind of understand what the problems are now, but it's a matter of going back. Windows, blue screen of death, runs the medical world system. That's very strange. I think Windows 10 out of the box is not HIPAA compliant. It actually violates patient confidentiality as soon as you turn it on, because as you type, your auto-completes and your voice recognition, it sends them out to Microsoft and then back. There's actually a set of steps you have to go through to even make it legal to use for patient databases. So I think we're just now entering the period where there's a lot of practical pushback on that, and there's a lot of technological catch-up to do. Where the legal structure comes in on that, I don't really know, because I think if you just say everything has to be compliant, Congress says so, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think just saying it must be so is not going to actually get the work.
And then, Mike, in the medical device space, the FDA has their medical device cybersecurity guidance, both on the pre-market and post-market side. They've got new draft guidance out, but it's guidance. Where do you see that trend going?
So prior to starting this company, I was very much a free market person. Market should run everything, and the company, if security is a big issue, the company that does security best will win in the market. And then I saw incredibly dysfunctional market dynamics among medical device vendors where they say, I will fix this when somebody forces me to or when somebody dies, preferably only if it's somebody I know dies. They wouldn't say that explicitly, but they were basically implying that. So the FDA has done a great job of coming out with cybersecurity guidance, most recently about 6 weeks ago, saying you need to build security features into your devices. And they've done two things that I think pleasantly surprised me from a government agency. Number one, they made it guidance instead of a regulation. And we've asked, why is this not a regulation? And they said, if we say thou shalt encrypt, we have to say you have to encrypt with this length of a key using this particular algorithm and be very specific about it. And by the time that regulation is passed, that key length will no longer be valid and the encryption algorithm will have been broken. So it's impossible for a regulation to keep up with this. So a guidance is a more flexible format, which I was sort of impressed by. And then the way that they've written the guidance, they've sort of, rather than setting out what a medical device vendor should do, they've set out goals. So they've said that a medical device should have intrusion detection built in. Specifically, it should alert the user if the device has been attacked. Well, how do you do that? I don't know. What does that actually look like? We don't really know, and they're leaving it to the market to figure that out. Hopefully, we believe that we are providing some of the answers to those questions, but they've actually pleasantly surprised me for a federal government organization of how they've approached regulating around this problem.
So we've heard some industry challenges, we've heard some regulatory challenges. Jordan, from a law enforcement perspective, from a criminal angle, what gaps do you see in these industries?
The biggest thing is for the laws to catch up with the technology. So we've got laws that are on the books for cybersecurity that are completely outdated, and they need to be caught up for one. I think the biggest thing from getting security built in, kind of stepping back to the last question, from the ground up is really going to be you guys when you get out to wherever you work, really instilling in executive management the importance of cybersecurity and making sure that when you're investing in new technologies, IoT type technologies that bring tons of benefits to the company, really instilling, hey, before we purchase anything and connect this, are we going through the same processes and procedures, going through our checklists on these types of devices and making sure that they're meeting the same standards we do on our regular workstation systems, server systems? Because a lot of the companies that we see right now are not doing that. They are simply seeing awesome new devices that provide them connectivity, new functionality, speeds up their business, and they're just get it, plug it in, don't worry about the security. So I think that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
So on that note, for advice for students in the program, maybe we can start with Brad and we'll just kind of move down the line. What are your main takeaways for students exiting the program into the job market?
Well, I think the main takeaway, from this discussion is that your area is wide open. Wherever you see a lot of change happening, change is opportunity. And so really, whatever kind of areas, when you're talking about medical devices, or you're talking about artificial intelligence, or offensive or defensive elements of the trade, really, there are so many different areas where you can go out and make a difference. I think it's wide open. And so, in a number of ways, it's like the Wild West all over again. So I think you have tremendous opportunity with really wherever it is you settle out.
Okay, I'd say when you graduate, congratulations. You've got your degree. Wherever you start your first job, it's just a beginning. It's just the first step in a very, very long process. And as you're working, the ground is shifting under your feet. Things are changing all the time. Technology is changing. The nature of the attacks are changing. Things we never even thought of suddenly become ways that systems can be breached. So you always have to be reading. Continuous education is built into the certifications. You're all going to get your CISP, or your certified ethical hacker, or one of the other certifications which are required to enter this field. That all of them have a continuing education requirement. You must get a certain number of continuing education units every year to maintain your certification. And that is done for a specific reason, because the field changes so rapidly. So the degree gets you, and you get your first job, get your foot in the door. You need to be reading some journal or some cybersecurity book, or take a class, or do something every year. You need to be doing this. And I also, as a longtime member of the Information Systems Security Association, in fact, I'm president of the Sacramento chapter, I strongly recommend joining a professional society. In San Diego, we have ISACA, we have ISSA, we have ISC Squared. There's an OWASP chapter. They usually have meetings once a month. I'm sorry, what was the other one, Derja? IEEE. Oh, IEEE too. So attend these meetings, join a professional society, get involved in one of these professional societies as one of the directors or officers of these organizations. You'll make great contacts. I've gotten a lot of jobs over the years through my contacts in the professional societies. So it's a great way to network outside of your little security group in whatever company you're in to find other opportunities. And I'm going to tell you, after 3 to 5 years in a company, if you don't jump someplace else, you're growing stale. You're falling behind. You will never get a sufficiently wide variety of opportunities in any one organization. You must be willing to jump ship periodically and learn something new, to get advanced into a new position, to learn new skills. Because a company doesn't want to pay for you to train you to learn something new when you're already doing a good job on one thing. But I said, the ground is shifting under your feet. Eventually that won't be needed anymore. It's up to you to take control of your career and look for opportunities. And through the professional societies, that becomes a lot easier. So.
Yeah, kind of adding to the first two comments and something that Brad said in his keynote speech, find the thing you're interested in. It's a fascinating field, cybersecurity in general, computers, technology, networks, and it intersects with these societal issues now about, say, privacy and how much information do you want to share and what does that even mean. And I would think if you're going to this field, you could find enough to kind of do your classwork and stay up late at night every night reading because you can't stop, and it's interesting. So find just in your life in general, and this is kind of what Brad was saying, find that thread that really keeps you going, and then as the ground shifts around you, as some of the technologies change, you'll still be the leader. So as some of you go out into the job market, something to keep in mind, when I interview people, I'll ask them standard questions, and then I typically ask them something that I would hope gets them excited, whatever it is. So what do you think the future of this is? Where do you think AI is going? And I don't really care what the answer is. I just care that they've thought about it. You could do this and this and this, and a lot of people to have some side project. They didn't get paid for their side project. They don't care if it's monetized. They just think it's really cool. That's the person you want to hire. And similarly, if you can intersect that with cybersecurity, as these things move on, as the field moves on, you'll already know about the new technology, right? Like, think about when you heard about blockchain and Bitcoin. And it's kind of fun, some of these things, if you're a technologist, you see these ideas come through. Like, hey, I remember, I'm trying to think, I think the question we phrased as, at what price was Bitcoin when you first heard about it? And for me, it might have been $3 or $15 or something like that. It's kind of these questions. And then I don't even remember, at some point you couldn't really even, it was hard to get a monetary value out of it. It's hard to exchange. But those are the people that were just following it because it's cool and maybe mining coins back then or buying coins of what it is. They're ahead now. And so now when people say, well, how can you use blockchain for these smart contracts? Oh, that's very easy for you to figure out now, this extra little piece of knowledge to something you already know, and it doesn't feel like work. So some people get up, it sucks, they get out of bed, they go to work, they wait for 8 hours and they go home. Don't make that your day, right? Try to figure out how you can be in a position where you get up, you do the thing that you think is fascinating and awesome, and there are plenty of jobs for that. And especially in this wide field, it's not going away for a while.
So I'll give you just some practical job search advice, which I wish I would have heard in graduate school. So I remember getting ready to graduate from graduate school and feeling totally unqualified for any job and sending my resume into some online portal and never hearing anything back. Nobody gets a job through like monster.com or putting your resume into a portal. I've been amazed by how helpful people in very senior leadership positions will be if you reach out to them. For example, when I was starting MedCrypt, our business model is similar to this company Twilio, and the guy who founded Twilio seems like a cool guy, and I figured out his Twilio's email format, and it was like first.last@twilio.com, and I sent an email to jeff.lawson@twilio.com. Said, hey, when you started the company, did you have this problem, and how did you address it? Starting a company around this, thanks, Twilio's awesome. And like 80 seconds later, he wrote back, actually, Sony was our first customer and did this thing. I was like, whoa, the CEO of Twilio just emailed me back. I emailed Jack Dorsey at Stripe. He has not yet written back. But my point is, if you find people that are in positions where you would like to be in a couple of years and you email them, 20% of them will help you. And that's the way that I have seen people find meaningful jobs they're excited about.
And they respond to that passion. People, wait, you cared enough to email me? I want that person. I want to see what he says and what he thinks, and that's the way to do it.
Just don't be creepy about it.
Yeah, don't be creepy. Speaking of cybersecurity, I don't know if you just broke a law by doing that or not, but.
Well, contact, that's a good suggestion. But when you contact people like this, usually you say you want to have an informational interview. You're just looking for information about the field, about what's, how you should build your resume so that you'd be, a good fit in a field like this. As long as they know you're not directly trying to apply for a job through them, they'd be much more willing to answer your questions.
Exactly. The ask for advice, get money, ask for money, get advice thing is totally true.
I want to second everything these guys said about continued learning, finding what your passion is, because that's absolutely critical. But to offer something just a little bit different, for any of you guys that go into cybersecurity field, especially in like incident response, reach out to your local law enforcement. Every major city has cyber FBI agents, and they touch all major cities. And so if you reach out to them and establish that contact, and you can do a lot of that through a lot of the professional organizations that you mentioned as well, because we're members of those as well, and we go to those events. And if you have a contact that you can reach out to in the event that you have a breach or an intrusion, that's on your worst day. You don't want to be having to call the tip line or call the office and trying to find somebody. If you have that local contact, somebody who can come out, can give you advice, can tell you what you need to collect so that you can pass it on to law enforcement, so they can help you track down whoever did it. That's key. So, and we've got a great organizations here in San Diego that do just that with us. So wherever you end up, it's something I'd encourage you to do.
So to recap, follow your passion, keep reading, don't be creepy. Call the cops.
The government is your friend.
Gotcha.
Not necessarily in that order.
The
Let's start with
government
don't be
is here
creepy.
to help.
That's right. Oh, don't be creepy sort of runs that line through the whole thing. Just don't be creepy is the general advice.
So I was thinking maybe we could take some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
too,
So
in case-
that's I wanted to open up. So questions.
Let me try that a little bit. So depending on where you live, so if you're talking about being in a metropolitan area like San Diego, for kids who are junior high school level, there are cyber programs for kids at that level, and these kids actually form teams like you would have a sports team, and they end up competing with each other. One school will compete against another one. Not every junior high school has it, but most high schools, I think, or a good portion of high schools have it. GA is an example. We do a cyber boot camp for this age bracket every summer, and so for the top handful of high school teams, they end up then coming to GA for a week and spend a week with us, and we try and take them from a yellow belt to a brown belt, in their capabilities, and give them a very focused week of development. And so I would encourage you to try and find those. If you're trying to help, a kid plug in, is see whether or not right in their own backyard they have something that they can do without having to travel anywhere. There might well be at their junior high school a team that's already working on it. It's after school, and there will be someone advising them from a local company, and that person will be probably very good. I've seen some extremely good mentors in these programs, and so I would see what there is even starting at that level. Because when the kids start at that level, it kind of addresses the question that I had earlier, which how do you build some of these deeper skill sets? I can tell you we had a young man. He looked like he was 12 years old, but he was in high school, and one of the other companies that was in the cyber boot camp came to me as a courtesy and said, "Are you going to extend an offer for this kid?" Because he was hacking the instructors' accounts just for fun to see how smart they were, and he was smarter than they were.
That man's name, Edward Snowden.
Yeah, and so we weren't going to extend an offer to this young man, but this other company did. He ended up doing extremely well with that. So you just never know where someone might find their passion in it, or also equally they might find that that's not their passion, that they want to do something different. That's equally as important.
So you mentioned that the guy was hacking like his trucker accounts. So that kind of brings up an ethics, discussion. That, of course, I think we had the last cyber discussion. But as we move toward this, how do you see like younger people continuing to not get in trouble? As these programs are starting to proliferate, it's making it easier. But for the kid now, how do they continue to not get in trouble, but also turn those into meaningful endeavors?
Yeah, there's increasingly, there's a number of cyber ranges. Oh, the question was, how can these kids practice cyber techniques without going to jail because they're hacking the wrong places? So was that a good rephrase? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the idea is that first of all, computer hardware and software is a lot cheaper than it used to be. It's not that hard now for quite inexpensively to set up your own home network if you want to do this type of thing at home. And in fact, that would be one of the things to teach in the Saturday camps for the high school students, how to set up your own home cyber range. Because you can get a Raspberry Pi now for, what, 20 bucks? So you set up a bunch of those in a network and you're good to go. So there are opportunities that people can do this at home. B, there are cyber ranges that various companies are offering now online, specifically so people can practice. And there's quite a few free ones now. You just do a Google search, free cyber range, and you can get access and do various kinds of exercises. There's absolutely no reason why someone has to get this experience by doing something illegal, which could land them in jail for several years, even a teen now. So, and we teach that in the cyber programs. We tell the kids, do not do this. Promise, we swear you will not use your superpowers for evil. You only use them for good.
So yeah, the term's white hat hacker, right? So a lot of companies will hire a hacker and say, can you break my system? So that's probably, if you're interested in that format, the way to do it. And I think some of those can be just as high levels as anything else, but you're working for the good guys. And kind of extend that with your question about school and these after school programs. Stay in school, school's great. But a lot of it is changing, I think, right? The education's changing, what people should know is changing. And it's always been, I think, that it's the things you do outside of school that really is where you get your education. The cool thing now is there's just so much you can do outside of school. So these programs with GA, whoever's running the programs online, meeting with people. I would recommend getting offline a little bit to actually meet with people, because I think you just learn a lot more working with people directly. But yeah, there's a lot you can do outside of the framework on school. And while we kind of refigure out what we're doing with education now that there's just so much information available, don't let that stop you. Just go ahead and learn the things you're going to learn regardless, and don't let the school and what they're teaching you, the minimal set of things they're teaching you there, hold you back.
Other questions? Yeah.
Just going back to the same thing, there's like a lot of healing stuff. Like, why would I go into CCNA, teach me about like basic networking where I can just download OpenCV and do facial detection, really easy, and it cost me writing 11 line of code with Python or JavaScript, right? So on that point, should there be some sort of say workshops or private sector schools? Because I do know students, my family, friends, relatives that actually in school learning really boring stuff, to be honest with you. And they go home simply on YouTube, and again, they come across something like OpenCV, other technologies like little bots that can actually write about 25 codes and they send, and you plug it in JavaScript. Facebook will send friend requests for about like 5,000, because now 5,000 is limited Facebook, and they create another account. So a lot of fun things and from, but could be fun. These that kind of like power could be kind of employed into a kid where they can use that into create instead the 5,000
Yeah, so I was right out of undergrad. I was a high school physics teacher, so my whole thing was like not standing in front of the classroom and talking that much. I wanted to have students actually doing experiments. But a lot of times, as somebody who is largely self-directed in your learning style, you may overestimate others' ability to or willingness to be self-directed in their learning style. So for some people, a format where they're sitting in a class and somebody's telling them how something works best, and other people want to be like breaking stuff, right? So I think having a variety of those sorts of educational formats is really helpful. And what you're describing, the notion that there's all this information online for people to go figure out on their own, might feel new with the internet or relatively new or whatever. But Michio Kaku, this famous physicist, I think he claims to have built a particle accelerator in his garage when he was 8. And the guy's like in his mid-60s or early 70s at this point. So there have always been people that go out and find information on their own and are doing a little bit extra. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right learning format for everybody. But I definitely think a more hands-on, experiential learning style would benefit everybody to some degree.
How are we on time? Wrap it up? One more question? Time for one more question. Yeah.
So to piggyback off of what Mike was talking about too, I know maybe Jordan can comment on this, but the author of the Mirai botnet, I think was recently hired by the FBI. Is that like a trend you think will continue on into the future, or?
Possibly. It kind of depends, right? We try to, get out and do educational things before somebody gets to creating the Mirai botnet, right? But, when somebody's kind of done their time, if you will, and we can, work with them, that's definitely something that we do. We're always looking for private liaison partnerships and things like that. So it's definitely something that we do.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks very much to this great panel.
Thank you so much to our panelists. That was awesome. Do you know people pay big money to have these guys all in their presence, and you had them for 2 hours, and you get them for another 45 minutes out in the reception area. So a huge thank you for giving back to our students and sharing your expertise with them. Really, really appreciate that. That was a very special evening, so thanks for being with us. So with that, we want to close in here and head to the real fun part, and that's our reception where we can all get to know each other a little bit longer, and we have until 7:30. So let's go. Thanks again for coming.